The House will come to order. The Pledge of Allegiance will be led by Ozani Duval and Omaya Duval, cousins of Representative Melton. Hey guys,
ready? Please join us in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Kohler, please take the roll.
Representative Becker. Representative Becker.
You want to get in the...
Who? Becker.
Absent.
Absent. Buck. Buckner. Conti. Corum. Court. Del Grosso. Dorr. Duran. Everett. Exum. Fields. Fisher. Foote. Garcia. Gardner. Giroux. Janal. Hamner. Holbert. Hollinghorst. Humphrey. Joshi. Kagan. Kraft-Tharp. Labuda. Landgraf. Lawrence. Lebsock. Lee.
Great job.
May. McCann.
Representative Becker present.
McLaughlin. McNulty. Melton. Mitch Bush. Moreno. Murray. Navarro. Nordberg. Pabon is excused. Peniston. Representative Peniston. Pedersen. Primavera. Priola. Rankin. Rosenthal. Ryden. Sane. Salazar. Schaefer. Scott. Singer. Sonnenberg. Stevens. Swam. Zabo. Tyler. He's here. Vigil. Waller. Williams. Wilson. Wright. Young. Speaker Ferrandino.
Morning, Corey.
64 and 1. What? 64 and 1.
Is he Singer?
Oh yeah. Everyone but Pabon. 64 and 1. Oh. He's there.
With 64 members present, one excused, a quorum is present. Representative Singer. Please don't sing.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'll do my spoken word version today. Mr. Speaker, I move that the reading of the Journal of Thursday, March 27th, 2014, be dispensed with and that it be approved as corrected by our wonderful Chief Clerk, Marilyn Edmonds.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no? Well, it is probably the longest journal we've had, so it would probably take a while to be read at length. So I assume you want to go home this weekend. So the motion is adopted. Announcements and introductions. Representative Labuda.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Good morning, members. Again, just a reminder that this is Women's History Month, and I mentioned a little bit yesterday about the Colorado Women's Hall of Fame. They do have a display downstairs on the first floor. It includes the faces and a brief description of each of the legislative women who are in the Women's Hall of Fame. And I'm just going to give you a brief description of the kinds of women that are there. And it starts out as typical and goes into something else. They are teachers, doctors, scientists, politicians, social activists, bankers, newspaper publishers, philanthropists, humanitarians, authors, a symphony conductor, a former prime minister, a Nobel Peace Prize nominee, a jurist, a Pulitzer Prize-winning playwright, an historical preservationist, a true Western pioneer, an aviation pioneer, a former Miss America, and a Cheyenne princess. And I'll wager you will never be able to find that group of people anywhere else except in the Women's Hall of Fame. So again, I urge you please to go downstairs and look at the legislative women who have preceded us and who have been inducted into the Women's Hall of Fame. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Salazar.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Of course, I have my two girls here today, and I told them stay up in the gallery so I can introduce you to the chamber, and of course they didn't listen to me. They went back to my office, but my two girls, Lilia and Alex, are here, and it is my wife's birthday today. And I'm very happy to say happy birthday to her. And I'm going to also introduce Tracy Kraft-Tharp's brother, Tim Kraft, who is sitting right over here. Hello, thank you very much.
Representative Coram.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, for the first time in the 4 years that I've been here, I felt cheated last night. Apparently, Representative Melton has never watched The Price is Right. Because you cannot go over and win. I said that we would be out at 10:17. We went out at 10:20, and I was cheated out of this wonderful recognition is the word I'm looking for. Thank you very much. I appreciate Mr. Dorr, but he was 2 minutes over. I was 3 under. I win.
Well, we could have a death match between the two of you to see who actually wins. Where's Representative Dorr? I think he just ran. Representative Melton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I was actually going to come up to make the clarification. It was over under, and when the gavel went down at 10:20, it meant that Representative Coram was 3 minutes away, and Representative Dorr was only 2. Over under. Over under. Well, come on down. So, but very good job being only 3 minutes away.
I think I was only 3 hours off. Representative Mitch Bush and Hamner for the
E-report.
always
Good morning,
interesting
colleagues.
ski report.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
And Wilson.
And Wilson.
And Wilson, and everyone else who has a ski area in their district.
It's Friday.
Or
Come
near
on,
their
ski
district
report.
or in their state.
Okay,
Hamner.
just...
I got called on.
Oh, you got called on first?
Thank
All
you,
right.
Mr. Speaker. And I wonder how many of us are going home this weekend or tonight to shovel snow. Yes, some of us are going home and we'll be shoveling snow because it just keeps snowing up in the high country. And not only that, it is spring, and there is nothing better than spring skiing in the high country. So I hope you get a chance to relax, come on up and enjoy it.
I would ditto that, and
Mr.
just
Mitch
so you...
Bush.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Sorry.
I have to get called on.
Still tired. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It snowed Wednesday night, Thursday night, and it's supposed to snow a little, but not too much today. So what that means is that Vail, like nowhere on earth, got 9 inches in the past few days. Beaver Creek, home of the Birds of Prey Alpine World Championship course, got 9 inches, and Steamboat, the home of the best tree skiing and the nicest people in the best town, got 7.
Representative
come on
Wilson. Representative Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I'm just representing lowly Monarch. What you won't get at Monarch is the Lincoln Tunnel.
The Eisenhower, you mean?
No lift lines.
Lincoln Tunnel's in New York, New Jersey.
No outrageous prices. No traffic jam. No lost kids. Monarch, no problem.
Representative Labuda.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just to let you know what happens when there is a legislature whose spouse is retired, as we're speaking, he's either on the slopes now or almost on the slopes, probably going up I-70 that route, because I'm sorry, I think Monarch is just a few too many hours away. But look forward to that when you retire, folks.
Any further announcements? Representative Becker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Our discussion last night on the budget reminded me of a children's book. It's called The Tumbleweed Came Back. And my son loves this book, and I had to sneak it out of his bedroom this morning. I would like to offer it to Mr. Dorr on loan for a short period, because it talks about no matter what they did, the tumbleweed just came back. So I'm happy to circulate it, but in the meantime, it's on loan to Mr. Dorr.
Representatives DURAN and Madam Majority Leader.
Oh, I need a copy of that book. Okay, well, this morning I'm actually going to give a tribute to Miss Ann Williams, who is a Professor of the Year. I'd like to welcome and congratulate Metropolitan State University of Denver Professor Ann Williams for being one of 4 professors in the United States to be named Outstanding Baccalaureate College Professor by Carnegie Foundation. Please stand up, and I want to say a few things about her. The Outstanding Baccalaureate College Professor of the Year is chosen on the basis of extraordinary dedication to undergraduate teaching determined by excellence in the following 4 areas: impact on and involvement with undergraduate students, scholarly approach to teaching and learning, contributions to undergraduate education in the institution, community, and profession, and support from colleagues and current and former undergraduate students. Professor Williams has been a professor at MSU Denver since 1990, and she teaches French in the Modern Languages Department. Professor Williams has already received many honors for her teaching, including the 2010 MSU Denver Faculty Senate Teaching Excellence Award, the 2008 Colorado Congress of Foreign Language Teachers Creativity Award, and the 2001 CCFLT McGraw-Glencoe Teacher of the Year Award. In 2007, her Advanced Conversation course was selected by the Education Policy Improvement Center as a College Board Advancement Placement World Languages Best Practices course.
Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I am very honored also this morning to welcome to this chamber and to give a tribute to CU Professor of Physics, Stephen Pollack, who was named a 2013 United States Professor of the Year. The U.S. Professor of the Year Awards recognize the most outstanding undergraduate instructors in the country in the category of doctoral and research universities by the Carnegie Foundation for the Advancement of Teaching and the Council for Advancement and Support of Education. Professor Pollack teaches undergraduate physics classes with a philosophy rooted in using evidence-based research to support classroom instruction. Pollack's passion for teaching overflows into his research through studying the effectiveness of teaching techniques, and he has earned numerous teaching laurels. Professor Pollack cares about every student in his classes, whether they be introductory, non-majors, or advanced students, and he works diligently to help people see that physics is about their life, that physics is relevant to their future, and that it's interesting. In other words, a lot of fun, and a powerful way of examining the world around them. Pollack's teaching successes reflect on the larger culture of CU Boulder's Department of Physics, which values effective teaching, and I would like you to recognize Professor Pollack at this time.
Please stand.
Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I'd also like to recognize his guest, his wife, Rinsky Pollock, Noah Finkelstein, who is a nationally recognized STEM expert from CU Boulder, and CU Provost Russ Moore. Thank you for being here.
Representative McLaughlin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I was a little bit slow on the snow report. I just wanted to augment what Representative Wilson said regarding Monarch, which is also served by people that live in my district from Gunnison. And Monarch has more snow than any other ski area in the state, 105 inches at Midway. I'd also like to point out that the second number most ski depth in the state of Colorado is Wolf Creek, also served by people from my district and Representative Vigil. And finally, Silverton Mountain is the third, and that's directly in my district. So again, if you're looking for a lot of snow and you want to avoid the traffic of I-70, please take a look at these ski areas. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Seeing no more announcements or introductions, we will proceed to our next order of business. Third reading of bills, final passage. Members, please return to your desks. Mr. Kohler, please read the title of House Bill 1337.
House Bill 1337, Representatives Duran and Jarrell, Senator Stebbins, concerning an increase in the General Fund Reserve.
Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the adoption of House Bill 1337 on third reading and final passage.
Seeing no discussion, the question for the House is the passage of House Bill 1337 on third reading and final passage. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. Representatives Becker, Fields, and Scott. Representative Becker. Close the machine with 64 aye votes, 0 no votes, 1 excused, and 0 absent. House Bill 1337 is passed. Co-sponsors, Representative Becker is fined 5 tumbleweeds or $5, whichever she wants. Close the machine. Mr. Kohler, please read the title of the House Bill 1339.
House Bill 1339 by Representative Jarrell, Senator Hodge, concerning the creation of the Hazardous Substance Site Response Fund.
Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the adoption of House Bill 1339 on third reading and final passage.
Seeing no discussion, the question for the House is the passage of House Bill 1339 on third reading and final passage. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. Representatives Becker, Buck, and Swam. Close the machine. With 49 aye votes, 15 no votes, 1 excused, and 0 absent, House Bill 1339 is passed. Co-sponsors. Close the machine. Mr. Kohler, please read the title of the House Bill 1340.
House Bill 1340 by Representative Jarrell, Senator Lambert, concerning the State Toxicology Laboratory in connection with making appropriation.
Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the adoption of House Bill 1340 on third reading and final passage.
Seeing no discussion, the question for the House is the passage of House Bill 1340 on third reading and final passage. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. Representative, close the machine. With 63 aye votes, 1 no vote, 1 excused, and 0 absent, House Bill 1340 is passed. Co-sponsors. Close the machine. Mr. Kohler, please read the title to House Bill 1341.
House Bill 1341, Representative Mayo, Senator Stebbins, concerning transfer of monies from State General Fund to the Department of State Cash Fund for the purpose of repaying a prior transfer.
Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the adoption of House Bill 1341 on third reading and final passage.
Mr. Minority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I also urge an aye vote on 1341. This was money that was basically taken from the Department of State, and this is a way that we're repaying this money back. And I think this is especially important to where maybe if the parents of the kids from Emmanuel Lutheran School are accessing the Department of State, they will know that they will be able to use these funds. So I urge an aye vote.
We can all welcome them and represent Mr. Minority Leader. You're fined $3 for inappropriate introduction. Seeing no actual discussion, the question for the House is the passage of House Bill 1341 on third reading and final passage. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. Close the machine. With 63 aye votes, 1 no vote, 1 excused, and 0 absent, House Bill 1341 is passed. Co-sponsors. Close the machine. Mr. Kohler, please read the title to House Bill 1342.
House Bill 1342, Representative DURAN, Senator Stebbins, concerning transfers of monies related to capital construction.
Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the adoption of House Bill 1342 on third reading and final passage.
Madam Assistant Minority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And colleagues, I just want to say thank you for your spirited aye vote yesterday on seconds on this bill. And I just want to say this put the last piece of the puzzle back together. If we have extra money, one-time money is always the best spent money because we can do a lot of things in the state. And this way we can help higher education get what's been taken away from it for so many years. And I urge an aye vote. Thank you.
Seeing no further discussion, the question for the House is the passage of House Bill 1342 on third reading and final passage. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. Close the machine. With 62 aye votes, 2 no votes, 1 excused, and 0 absent, House Bill 1342 is passed. Co-sponsors. Close the machine. Mr. Kohler, please read the title to House Bill 1336.
House Bill 1336, Representative DURAN, Senator Stebbins, concerning the provision for payment of the expenses of the executive, legislative, and judicial departments of the state of Colorado and of its agencies and institutions for and during the fiscal year beginning July 1st, 2014, except as otherwise noted.
Representative DURAN.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the passage of House Bill 1336.
On third reading and final passage?
On third reading and final passage.
Any discussion? Representative Duro or Representative Duran?
We're wearing the same colors.
I know it's.
We gotta. God.
I'm not going to comment.
That really.
Who would like to go first so I can Representative Duro?
Well, why don't you go first? You go first. Go ahead.
Representative May. See, it's so bipartisan they can't decide who's going first.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just wanted to talk in favor of 1336. In in the sense of this was my first year serving on the Joint Budget Committee. And what I learned from that process, not only do you put in a lot of hours and hard work, and you have 6 people with varying points of view on how to put together a budget, but also what you really come away with when you come down to the floor on the House is what we all have in common, which is that we all love Colorado and we all care about our state. And the other thing I learned in this process was that you never have 100% agreement because we come from different places. But I think this budget gets us to a good place. We invested in higher education. We invested in the financial security of our state. We provided money to our counties to provide services for assistance in processing food assistance, Medicaid applications. We've also looked at providing money for the fire and the floods and the wildfires in this state, which I think is very important. We also did a lot of things around tax-based relief for small counties. I received letters from both county commissioners from not only from big counties, but from small counties. Otero County reached out to me and a couple of others thanking us for recognizing the needs that they have in their counties, and this budget supplied that. I also think we came together on capital construction and investing in our higher ed institutions, as well as recognizing that we have a need for IT projects, whether we like them or not. I understand the not part, trust me. But with that, I'm asking for us to support this budget because I think it's good for Colorado. Yes, there are things in there, even I, on the Joint Budget Committee, are not happy with. But when we come together and we try to mix our different values and we represent different parts of the state, that's what you get. You get most of what you like, you get a little what you don't. And with that, I just want to also go off a little bit off the subject a little. Don't yell at me too loud. I want to thank...
I give a lot of deference to our JBC members, so...
I also want to thank Representative Duran. This is her last year of working on this budget. I thank you for your help, your assistance in tutoring me, and not enough coffee for me, but I just really want to thank you, and I wish you the best in the future. I want to thank Representative Duran, or Madam Chair, for everything you've done for this budget, and I really, really want to thank the staff. The JBC staff are incredible. They work enormous amount of hours. They were here 2:30 in the morning when we all left, and then came around and had to sit through our caucus. And I just can't thank them enough. And with that, thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Duran.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, and thank you, Representative May. When the Joint Budget Committee brings the budget over here, it's a suggestion. What you all did yesterday was you gave it form, shape, and color. Through your collaboration and through your compassion and for your respect across the aisle, you did a really great job. The budget that walked in this door is not the same budget that walked out. And it's because of you. And I really am, I'm so proud to be a part of this body. Every year I learn something new, not only about the state when we go through the budget process, but for instance, and Representative Conti, I learned something from Representative Conti yesterday when the Republican caucus was going through Representative Rosenthal's proposed circumcision amendment. I learned that Representative Conti has an understanding of an aspect of my husband's attributes that I don't know how she knows. It's a long story, guys. We have a better caucus than you do. But mostly, I'd like to thank all of you. I'd like to thank the staff. Mr. Speaker, Madam Majority Leader, Mr. Assistant Majority Leader, wherever you are, I don't know if you're where you said you were, but you're someplace. Our Chief Clerk, Marilyn Edens, Pat, Christine, Corey, Ron, Joel in the corner. Our enrolling clerks, Agnes, Cecile, Anthony, you never see them. We know they're there, but we never see them, and they're very quiet, doing their work. Our Sergeant of Arms, who are not very quiet. John Wallen, thank you, sir. You are a great leader. Ron, you came back, thank God. Jim, Denny, John Judson, and Leon, you keep us safe and you keep us comfortable, and I thank you. Our legislative secretary, Pam and Marcia, they're not here, they're in the other room. The finance clerk, Ward, he pays us, thank you. And he pays our aides, thank you more. Our file clerks, Kathy Hahn and the late, don't duck, Kathy, get back up here. She just ducked out of the way. Those ladies are so very, very special because they're here, they're keeping us organized, they're filing our stuff away, and they're some of my best girlfriends. I've enjoyed you guys, but they are a blast. And last but not least, Patricia, who's in our legislative secretary that's in House Services. We never get to see her. Hopefully she's listening, and we thank you very much. I'd like to thank you all for the honor of doing 4 budgets. You don't get an opportunity very often to spend about $36 billion. And I've actually done enough shopping for a while, and I really appreciate the opportunity, but it has been an honor. Representative McNulty, you broke a record by allowing me to serve as the first woman in this body. Thank you. We also broke another record, and Representative Waller and the Speaker chose 3 women for the first time in the history of the state to serve on the Joint Budget Committee from the House. That was last year. Thank you. To Representative Vigil and Representative Szabo and Representative Fisher, thank you for the spanking. CDC did the right thing. You all, I am so proud of you. You put us in the place, and God bless you. And what you did is you did a service for the state, and you fulfilled the intent of the budget. Thank you. I was talking to the president of Fort Lewis College yesterday. Her project has been on that list since 2002. Thank you. Mr. Minority Leader, you did a great job. You were up here a lot. Well, no, they did, because you were a gentleman and you were up here. And my caucus, honestly, I said it last night, I said it yesterday, I have never seen a quality and a number of amendments that you all presented that were thoughtful and caring and not crazy. They were good amendments. They were such good amendments. Thank you. You did such a good job on the budget. And I'd like to thank the majority for allowing us to get some amendments on the budget. Thank you. Thank you. That's actually, you gain votes when you do that. I'd like to thank leadership for the deals that were made that were beyond what happened on the long bill. I appreciate those. That type of collaboration benefits the state. And I'd also like to thank the JBC staff, as Representative May did. They do work very, very hard. And they love this state, and they're here so long. Now, you may know that they take part of the summer off because they're trying to recover from what we do to them during the session. But they work very, very hard, and they're very dedicated, and they love public policy. I have one last request. We are doing something, the House is doing something next week that has never, to my knowledge, been done before. We're holding an appropriations meeting on April 2nd, which is Wednesday, which is the morning of the Senate caucus. So that means, and it starts at 7:30 in the morning. If you look at your calendar, you're going to see there is a pant load of bills that's starting at 7:30. There is no way we're going to be done by 9 o'clock. There's no way, particularly with what's going to happen with a lot of those bills. And then they're going to have to, that staff is going to have to go man those caucuses for the Senate to give them the same level of attention and care and thoughtfulness that they gave us. That's going to be tough for them. And then we're going to have another appropriation meeting on Friday, April 4th. That's shown on a calendar. So picture this. You're John Ziegler. You've been up until 2:30 in the morning crafting all the amendments. And this is on Wednesday night. You've been crafting all the amendments for the Senate that are going to be offered on Thursday during second reading of the long bill. So you get up in the morning and you got to get in early because those amendments, they've got to be distributed. And you've got to make sure they're distributed because that's his job. He's going to spend the whole day on the floor of the Senate doing what he did for us, sitting right there at a desk, trying to keep a tally of what goes up and what goes down on the long bill, because he's got to be able to keep an ongoing balance of all of our conversations and all of our amendments. That's what he's got to do. And last night, we got home at, I got home at 11, so we left here about 10. I know Representative Dorr probably didn't get home. I don't know what time he went home. But so, and John Ziegler lives pretty far south. I think he lives in Representative McNulty's district. So then John's going to go to bed that night, and he's got to be back here at 7:30 in the morning on Friday. Where were you at 7:30 this morning? I'll tell you where I was. I wasn't up and ready to go, that's for sure. And then there's another very long list of appropriation bills. I ask as a courtesy to our staff, could we please postpone our appropriations meetings until the next week? We all want our bills funded. We all want to make sure they're successful. But in respect and deference to the staff, I ask us to move those 1 week further. I also ask you all for an aye vote. When you're in the minority, it's easy to say no. It's courageous to say yes. Please vote yes.
Representative Duran.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I, of course, rise in support of this bill. There was a lot of work and compromise that went into this piece of legislation, and I am so excited to see a document that truly has statewide representation when we think about the investments that need to be made as Colorado continues its road of economic recovery. And one thing that I will tell you is that Yesterday, we had some conversation about the letter that was sent over to Minority Leader Del Grosso. And I just want to make it very, very clear that this was the first year that I had the opportunity to chair the Joint Budget Committee with only 2 years under my belt of being on the Joint Budget Committee. And that offer to reach out to the other side of the aisle and try and figure out ways to work together and come up with compromises and come up with priorities was genuine. And it's still genuine. And so the door is still open this session and next session as well to try and figure out how we start some of the conversations about issues that affect our state much earlier in the process and throughout the very, very end of the process as well. I think we ended up in a place that was very, very positive, not only for the members of this chamber, but for the entire state of Colorado. And as we go through this process of debating different issues with different ideas, I think yesterday and this document is truly representative of what we can do when we listen to each other and we try to work together and we try to take that step forward to come up with compromise. It is a document that I think is reflective of so many values. Some have said that the budget is a moral document. And I believe it is reflective of many of the values of the people of this state. I think the other thing that I would like to say is I want to thank the Speaker Ferrandino, for appointing me to this position. Representative Giroux is right that we have had greater representation of women on the Joint Budget Committee than previous years. And I didn't even realize it, but it was actually former Senator Polly Baca who came to me and she said, you know, CRISANTA, do you realize that you are the first Latina in the history of Colorado to serve as chair of the Joint Budget Committee? And so we have seen many glass ceilings broke last year and this, and I think we need to remember it's not enough to be the first. And it's not enough to have some women on the budget committee, but what is most important is that we are not the last. And that we continue to make sure that there is equality on all levels of government, levels of politics, levels of business. And this year was a meaningful step forward to that goal, but there's a lot more work to be done. And the thing that is so exciting to me about this budget is not just that there's more women on the committee or to be the first Latina to ever chair the committee, but because of those values when it comes to issues that affect women in the state that are represented in the document. Investments like additional funding going to family planning. Investments like making sure that more pregnant women have access to prenatal services. Investments like trying to drive down the very high cost of childcare in the state of Colorado that impacts so many Colorado families, but when it comes to women in particular that struggle with trying to balance their work life and their family life, we are touching the lives of so many people in this state. And so with that, I ask for your support and want to reiterate that the door is always open to try and collaborate, negotiate, and come up with solutions that is good for every corner of Colorado.
Madam Majority Leader. Mr. Minority Leader. Mr. Minority Leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker Pro Tem. Members, I don't feel that I got my fill of amendments yesterday, so I'd like to ask permission for a third. No, I won't ask for permission for a third reading amendment. You know, I will start off, and again, I will thank also the JBC members, and I did it last night, but I don't think we can thank them enough and staff enough. The reality is the amount of work that they do behind the scenes that we don't see. We can never thank them enough on all of their hard work. And I will agree with the JBC members as well. There are some positives in this budget, things that I think that I know I solidly support. I supported the increase in the capital construction. I was really appreciative of the bipartisan work that was done to change the initial capital construction list that was in there and see a group of folks come together in a bipartisan fashion and work to try to go back and honor the process the way it was supposed to be and get that taken care of. And so I'm very supportive of that. Another big positive in there is moving that reserve to 6.5%. As you know, and you keep hearing a lot about future obligations, we're going to have Senate Bill 228 that's going to probably kick in here in the very next budget, which is going to obligate us to about $250 million in increased spending. And that is something that, you know, the reality is if we don't have increased revenue, we're going to have to figure out how to pay for those obligations because we're going to see that happen down the future. And some other positives that came through yesterday, last night, we saw Representative Sonnenberg and Representative Corum's amendment get on to address the phreatophytes and try to address some water issues that we're having. Initially, that amendment was voted down. I'm glad to see on the cow amendment that was able to barely slide and get on there. Representative Lawrence and her vehicular homicide, another one that was initially killed and was after a cow amendment was put on there as well. So there was a few things that we're putting on there, but the reality to say that there was a lot of listening to each other and a lot of compromise. The reality is we offered almost 40 amendments last night, and almost to a T, they were voted down. It was predetermined that these were going to be voted down. And I think Representative Moreno said it best last night when he said, well, maybe if you would have had more footnotes, we would have accepted more of your amendments. So I guess that is the input that Republicans are allowed to have on the budget is a footnote. Some other disappointments with the budget. There's $150 million of pre-blessed legislation. Some of them that haven't even been introduced yet, don't even have bill numbers, that we're somehow holding a placeholder for, and somehow we're not even allowed to even address that pot of money because it's already been pre-blessed. $150 million that's basically being set aside for, I won't say pet projects, but it kind of looks that way. Some other frustrations as well. Felony DUI. We heard that, well, Representative Del Grosso, you could have sent us a letter. You could have asked or responded to my letter. You could have told us what your priorities were. We heard yesterday that Representative Waller all summer long made multiple attempts to try to contact the chairperson of the Joint Budget Committee and said, this is something that's important to me. Let's see if we can find the funding for this. And the funding for the felony DUI, especially after the tragedy that we just saw happen just a few days ago, to think that we could not find the funding that was needed for that in the budget yesterday was very disappointing. Another disappointment was the fact that there's $50 million extra being spent in this budget, a little over $50 million being spent as a result of Obamacare. Now, we kept hearing that that was going to be free to the state of Colorado. That why should we not implement that here in Colorado? Because the reality is it's going to be free, and it's going to be way down the road that the state's going to have to start picking up a small percentage of the tab. We haven't even got there yet, and we're already spending $50 million out of this budget that we could be putting towards other needs that we have in the state. So if we're at $50 million now, what is that going to be down the road when the state's actually obligated to start picking up part of that tab? We could have started investing in infrastructure, especially transportation. We could have started putting general fund money towards those needs, but House Bill 1336 does not do that. We could have invested more money into higher education, specifically COF. We hear day after day after day from parents. I know when I'm talking to folks in my district, one of their big concerns is the high cost of higher education and inability a lot of times for kids to afford to be able to get access to that higher education. We could have put more money into COF. We could have helped those kids buy down some of those out-of-pocket expenses. But House Bill 1336 does not do that. When we talk about K through 12 education, Representative Wilson had an amendment yesterday which could have put just a small amount of money into an AP pilot program, which would have been huge for folks out in rural Colorado, for them trying to get a little bit of extra education to help them be more successful when they try to move into our higher education system. But somehow we weren't able to find any dollars in House Bill 1336 for that. House Bill 1336 does the bare minimum for our kids when we're talking about K through 12 education. It funds the per pupil count, and it funds the increase when we're talking about inflation, but it does nothing more than that. We made several attempts to free up some extra general fund money to buy down part of the negative factor. We made several attempts. We started at about 50 million. Went down to 40, went down to 30, went down to 20, and then at the very bottom, 10 million. And we've heard from district after district after district, superintendent after superintendent, principals, school board members, talking about, you know what, the number one way you could help us out is help buy down that negative factor. And we made absolutely, in House Bill 1336, no further investment in our K through 12 system. We could have done so much more to help provider rates. Yes, there's an increase for provider rates in here, and I applaud that. But the reality is we could have done so much more for those that are providing essential services to our most needy citizens. There again, those that are providing services for mental health, developmental disability, doctors, nurses, all different kinds of people that are taking care of our needy citizens. We could have done so much more in this budget, but House Bill 1336 did not do that. Now, members, there is a potential that some of these things that I talked about could be addressed in future legislation, but I'm not voting on future legislation today. I'm voting on House Bill 1336. And again, I'm thankful of the hard work that the folks did on House Bill 1336 to put this together, but it's tough for me to stand here and say this is a broad bipartisan budget, that there was a lot of input from Republicans and that there was a lot of working across the aisle to put this together. Members, we could have done so much more with the resources that we have, and we could have still done it in a fiscally responsible way. Now, we kept hearing that, well, if we give one more penny to this, well, we don't know what's going to happen in the future. Well, if we do this, well, that's going to obligate us for this. If you were to look through this budget, you'll find all kinds of new programs and expanding of programs that obligate us to future spending. But we didn't talk about that last night. We were unwilling to talk about the core functions of government and investing back in our state with those extra dollars. House Bill 1336 does not do that. And unless House Bill 1336 changes to address those problems, which it currently does not, I will be a no vote on House Bill 1336. And I urge you to do the same.
Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Madam Speaker Pro Tem. I had a speech already, and then the minority leader spoke, and I want to change it all. But let me first talk a little of history and where we are and what we're dealing with this year. And then I want to just address some of the concerns or some of the issues raised by the minority leader. So I entered this body October 1st, 2007 through a vacancy committee. Served a year and then got appointed to the Joint Budget Committee on sometime in November 2008. And let's remember what happened just before November 2008. The market crashed. We didn't know exactly what was going to happen, but we started in what we now know. We were hit by the greatest recession since the Great Depression. When my first year, we had money to spend. We were doing pretty well. My first year on the Budget Committee, we saw, by the time that year ended, over $1 billion reduction in our general fund. A 12.9, so 13% roughly reduction in the general fund. And for 3 years that I served on the Joint Budget Committee, we cut, and we cut. We slashed higher education. We created the negative factor and took $1 billion out of the schools compared to where the original interpretation of Amendment 23 said. We lowered the reserve from 4% to 2%. We were dealing with an economic crisis we had never seen in our lifetime, and hopefully we will never see again in our lifetime. It was not a pretty time to be on the Budget Committee. For someone who, like myself, who believes very much in investments in our public sector, who does so much good for our communities, to sit there and have to cut was very difficult. But it was what we had to do. Because, as many people know me, I'm fiscally pretty, I don't want to say the word conservative, but responsible. And we had to cut. You can't spend more money than you have. So we had to make tough decisions. And then during that time, after we started to see some recovery, in 2007-08, our budget general fund was about $7.7 billion. Okay? We didn't actually surpass the 07-08 budget numbers until 12-13 last year. And that, if you inflation adjusted and population adjusted, you're still not back to where we were prior to the recession. So that brings us to the budget today and where we are today. Because I think many of you are new members or weren't here prior to 2010 when we were doing some very difficult things. But we are in a better place. The economy is recovering. We can make investments. We can start putting back the pieces that were harmed during the Great Recession. And I think what we saw last night, or all day yesterday mostly, and what we heard this morning from the minority leader, is there is more to do. But we still have to live in the realities of the budgets we have. And while, yes, I would love to put more money into higher education, I'd love to put more money into K-12, I'd love to raise provider rates. There's a lot of things I'd love to do in this budget. But at the end of the day, that the budget has to be balanced. So let's talk about what's in this budget. Key issues around flood and fire recovery. Our state, when we started this legislative session, we talked about the impacts of the floods on our communities. They're not just felt then in September, but are still being felt, and as we heard from Representative Singer and Representative Buck during their resolution, will be felt for years to come. We made key investments to try and help those communities recover, and there is more to do. We also made investments in fire preparation. We made a historic investment in education. Higher education is seeing a $100 million increase, the largest increase in our state history. Now, Representative Giroux said last night, and I exactly agree with her, and she knows this because we used to serve on the JBC, that we're not anywhere where we're supposed to be in higher education. We should be much higher in our funding for higher education. But this is a huge step in the right direction. And K-12, while not reflected in this budget, but because of the great work of Representative Hamner and Representative Murray, through both the School Finance Act with Representative Buckner and the Student Success Act, we are making a huge investment in our K-12 system. This is a responsible budget that sets us up for success in the future. I just want to touch on a few issues, and I really wanted to be positive, but I couldn't, as you know me, I couldn't get through a budget debate without having a little bit of fire and brimstone, maybe. The minority leader talks about the $150 million in placeholder bills. And I agreed with him that that's a question of should the JBC have that authority or not. But I think that number and that statement sounds really scary and overwhelming. But let's look at what the JBC put in placeholders. When we look at those dollars, I think it tells a different story. $100 million that we're doing for higher education, that is the vast majority of that $150 million. The second largest piece of that is $17 million for House Bill 1002, came out the bipartisan flood committee for water infrastructure and natural disaster fund to help communities impacted by the floods. The second biggest piece is a bipartisan bill, yes, and it has not been introduced. But it's a bipartisan bill with Representative Kagan and Representative Gardner to put reforms and resources to correct the ills of our parole system. We also have $5.3 million for Discovery Task Force to deal with discovery issues. That is not introduced, but something I think will get wide bipartisan support. $3.5 million, that's a JBC bill for digital trunk radios to make sure that our communities can communicate with each other, a thing we've been trying to do since I actually got on the JBC, and finally this year can actually put the money into there. So when we talk about the $150 million, that's what we're talking about. Things that we know either we're going to do because we all agree that we need to make more investments in higher education, or because we need to help those who are impacted by the floods, or because we know we need to reform and invest in our parole system. These are all things that we've talked about, we've worked on, and are going to make our state better and stronger. We talked about bills. Representative, the minority leader talked about bills. Well, I just want to touch on a few things. One, last night I talked to Representative Waller after talking to some people in the Senate. And I think Representative Waller's bill will probably get support and move forward. I'm going to support it. I think there needs to be changes in it, but I support it. I think he's on the right track there. Representative Wilson's bill on advanced placement. We've asked, and as I said to Representative Wilson last night, we've asked all of our members as we look at fiscal notes, try and scale back your fiscal notes so we can see what we can pass. And I went to Representative Wilson last night and asked, can you do that on your bill? And if so, we can try and find a way to pay for your bill because it's a good bill. No one disagrees with the policy. And we're going to try and do that with Representative Wilson. And the minority talked about schools and how this is just the minimum. But if you actually look at page 42 of the narrative, I have this pesky thing of actually facts and figures and reading. Page 42 talks about the third paragraph, last sentence. Thus, the negative factor reduction is projected to grow. Wrong line. Of course. The JBC, through their work, put in more money into the School Finance Act, into the State Education Fund, to buy down at least $40 million in the negative factor. It is correct. the decisions by the Joint Budget Committee in the last days to reduce, so when we're talking about, so let's get this right because we all understand actually, because this is important as the minority leader shakes his head that I'm wrong. One, provider rate cuts that the minority leader wanted to increase were reduced from 3% to 2.5%. And state salary survey was reduced from 3% to 2.5%. And merit-based pay for state employees was reduced from 1.5 to 1%. So state employees got a 1% reduction from what we had. Provider rates were reduced by 0.5%. That money was freed up to do two things. One, to make sure we had some resources to do some of the capital projects we all agreed upon, and I'm glad the CDC worked to do even more through their amendment. And second, to put money into the state education fund so that we knew we had a sustainable way to pay down the negative factor at $100 million. So there are tons of choices. And Representative Duran said, and it's always said, usually on a budget debate, that the budget is a moral document. And that's true, it is a moral document. It shows where our values are, what we care about. But it's also a moral document that gets smacked in the face with reality. Because there are fixed costs, necessary costs, that we have to pay for. And there are competing interests. And this budget tries to balance those competing interests. This is my last year in the legislature. I've had 6 years of my hands very deep in the budget. Whether it was the 3 years on the JBC, 1 year I was the minority leader, now 2 years as the Speaker of the House. This is my last time to be able to vote for a budget. Well, we'll get it back in conference committee and we'll vote one more time, but last time to vote on third reading. And I have to say, of all the budgets we have voted on, this is the one I'm the most proudest of. Because we are doing the right thing for the people of Colorado. We are making the right investments. We are investing in higher education and K-12, key economic drivers for our state. And speaking of economic development, we haven't even talked about that, key economic development investments through the Office of Economic Development and International Trade that we're making in this budget. And then we also increased the budget reserve by 6.5%. To 6.5%. When I was there, we were at 2%. This investment, this increase, is going to make sure that we are better prepared and that you, all, especially you in your first session or your first term, that when and if we get into another economic downturn, we are better prepared for that than we were when I had to deal with it. We need to, and I ask you to commit over the next couple of years to take that 6.5% and make it to 10%, because that's really what we need as a reserve for the state. So this is a budget I am very proud to vote for. It's not everything I wanted, and I'm saddened to hear the minority leader ask for a no vote, because of all those time I've been here, I think this is absolutely the best budget that really does balance all the competing interests in our state. And lastly, and I'm going to just get off the budget for a second, because, yeah, okay, now I'm going to get emotional. Last night I was getting emotional too, because that was the last second reading debate on the budget, and yes, I'm a dork and a geek, and this stuff is what makes me the happiest when we are doing these issues. Representative Giroux, thank you. It's been a pleasure serving with you. You've been a thorn in my side and an ally on my arm for many years on the budget, and we don't always agree. Mostly we do, and you've done amazing work. And I think about all the members on the JBC since I've been there. I think back to Representative Palmer, Representative and then Senator White. I mean, amazing people. For those who don't sit on the JBC, and there's only a few members in the legislature who ever get the honor of sitting on the JBC, those are thankless jobs and tiring jobs. And we all owe a debt of gratitude to the members of the JBC. Representative Duran, Madam Chairwoman, You've done an amazing job spearheading this budget and making sure that it, one, came in a responsible way, in a way that shared the values and the realities that we live in. And Representative May, you have, I knew you when you were in the department like me, so I was a little biased because both department people, I knew you'd be an amazing member on the Joint Budget Committee, and you've exceeded every expectation. And I know as I leave, that Representative Duran and Representative May, you are going to be able to continue the amazing work at the JBC to get the work done for our state. I also want to thank two other groups. One, the JBC staff. I have a lot of friends over there, people I really care about. John Ziegler and all the staff there. They are dedicated to one thing, and that's the state of Colorado. They love our state, and they fight so hard to make sure our state gets the best budget. They do the analysis, the work, day in, day out, behind the scenes to make sure that we are prepared and ready to get into the debate we had yesterday, and the debate we'll continue to have over the next couple weeks as we finish the budget. And lastly, and something as we stand up here as the legislative branch, I think we also have to thank the executive branch. While we joke about the fact that we write the budget, they do a lot of input in the budget. And Director Sobenet and his staff at OSPB and all the staff at the departments throughout the state in their budget offices, where I was right before I got elected in the legislature, they do amazing work. And both proposing the budget and then implementing the budget we pass. They're the ones who put reality to the numbers that are on these pages. And so I thank them for all their work. And lastly, and we'll get to the laters when, at the end of session, where I'll be crying all day. But thank you, everyone, for the honor of letting me serve on the JBC, letting me be a geek and dork and care about these issues. This is the most important thing we do in the state. It's been an honor for 6 years to have my hands really deep in this and really have ability to shape this. And this is the best budget I've ever seen, and I really do, and I hope we will see a lot of yes votes, because this is something we can all be proud of.
Is there further discussion on House Bill 1336? Minority Leader Doug Rosso.
Thank you, Madam Speaker Pro Tem. And just like the Speaker who can't let things go, I am also the same. And when I get lectured about how I don't like facts and somehow I don't want to respond to facts, what the Speaker failed to finish reading in your lavender book on the $42 million that was put into K through 12 was to keep the negative factor from growing. We did not buy down the negative factor. So the statement that said we invested $42 million to buy down the negative factor already in the budget is an absolute false statement. So when I get told that, I don't like to listen to facts. And when you talk about salary increases for state employees, if you add those two numbers together, that's a 3.5% increase for state employees. I think if you go out and you talk to the average worker in the state of Colorado and ask them if they're getting a 3.5% increase, they're probably going to say no. Now, I'm not saying that our state employees don't deserve some kind of reward for doing a hard job. They do. I'm an employer. I like to reward for my employees as well when they do hard work. And it also saves the state money. If you pay them a little bit more, you keep people around, you don't have to hire and train new people. So it is an investment in employees. But we didn't even go down that path, the fact that we're going to give the state employees a 3.5% increase, but yet we're only going to give a little over 2% to the provider rates, those that are actually out there taking care of Colorado's most neediest citizens. And then somehow we're acting like we're doing an awesome thing by giving that little token raise. And I also didn't talk about the $20 million that's parked in the Controlled Maintenance Trust Fund that somehow is untouchable by Republicans yesterday as well. So when we want to talk about facts, and I get lectured about facts, let's talk about all the facts before we want to lecture me. With that, I still urge a no vote.
Seeing no further discussion, the question for the House is the passage of House Bill 1336 on third reading and final passage. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. Representative, close the machine. With 37 aye votes, 27 no votes, 1 excused, and 0 absent, House Bill 1336 is passed. Co-sponsors. Close the machine. Madam Majority Leader. Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to proceed out of order for consideration of SJR 21.
Seeing no objection, the House will proceed out of order for consideration of SJR 21. Mr. Kohler, please read the title to SJR 21.
Senate Joint Resolution 21 by Senator Todd, also Representative Labuda, concerning the recognition of National Women's History Month and in connection with designating March as Colorado Women's History Month.
Representative Labuda.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move Senate Joint Resolution 21, and I do not ask that it be read at length.
You got a lot of friends there, Representative Labuda, now. Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This resolution, if you take it out, you'll see the usual great things that we do generally. But I want you to turn to page 2 of your resolution. And one person I want to point out is Carrie C. Holly from Pueblo County. She has the distinction of being the first woman in United States history to introduce and get a bill passed. And that was a bill that raised the age of consent from 16 to 18. More than 200 women have served in our state legislature, and one was Helen Ring Robinson, who became the first woman to serve in the Colorado Senate, and she is one of the new inductees into the Colorado Women's Hall of Fame. And again, if you go downstairs and look at the pictures of those legislative women, you'll see, well, this is Helen Ring Robinson right here. You'll see a bigger picture of her down there. Currently, 41%, we constitute 41% of this body. That is the highest percentage ever. And to show you how the people of Colorado, and we appreciate you guys so much for supporting us, the average percentage of women in legislators is only 24.2%, so we're almost double that. Thank you so much for your support. For all the great things that women have done, and we could all go on and on, it was in 1975 that the United Nations designated March 8th as International Women's Day, and led the United States Congress in 1987 to designate the month of March as National Women's History Month. And for that, I thank all of you gentlemen, our friends, our husbands, brothers, sons, wherever they are. Thank you so much for your support of us. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Giroux.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And members, I just want to add, I went to the induction ceremony this year. A friend of mine was inducted posthumously. Her name was Elizabeth Wright Ingram, and she was the granddaughter of Frank Lloyd Wright. And she lived in Colorado Springs, and Colorado Springs, I've known Elizabeth, or I knew Elizabeth for about 20 years, and she and I were diametrically opposed philosophically, but she was an incredible woman. She did a lot for the state of Colorado. Her grandfather, of course, did a lot for the architectural vernacular of the world. One time she and I, and we used to get into these great battles, arguing back and forth about politics and architecture and everything else. And one day we were talking and I said, you know, Elizabeth, I think what your grandfather did was really great, but I actually think I would be more proud of what your dad did. And her father was an architect as well. Her father invented Lincoln logs.
Oh, hey.
So as we were going home that night, my husband Phil and I were driving back up the hill, and we were having a conversation about the different people that had been inducted that night. And he said, you know, it's really interesting. He said, did you notice how many of the women that were inducted tonight were actually standing on the shoulders of men? Ooh. So with that, gentlemen, this is for you. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Representative Labuda.
Thank you, Madam Chair. One thing that, pardon me, Mr. Speaker.
I was just...
I'm trying.
I have been called that before, but that's a different issue.
Yeah.
Representative Labuda.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. One thing that Representative Jerome neglected to mention, I think, is that Elizabeth Wright Ingram was also a pioneer female architect. So I presume that you two spoke about architectural issues. And just in closing, for me, I'd like to say with all these great women here, I won't be here next year, but I think next year is definitely the time to have a woman Speaker of the House again. So
there might be some division on that.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Any further discussion? Representative Murray.
Sorry, I know we all want to leave, but I have to just speak for the women of the world. And it seems to be getting worse out there in the world, that the secret to taking over a country is to suppress the women and to not educate the children and the women. And so anything that we can do to encourage the education of women, the fair treatment of women, and equality of women across the world, I think will improve our world. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Representative Schaefer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I want to thank Representative Labuda for doing all this research on women's history and all of the people here that have done research on women's history. How many of you are following March Madness? I think we all are. Now, what does that have to do with women's history? Well, here's some contemporary history. There are 2 teams in March Madness that have had undefeated seasons this year. Does anybody know who they are? No, they're in the women's division. Notre Dame and Connecticut. This is history, ladies and gentlemen. Undefeated 2 women's teams, first time in history. So it's been a great honor to work with all of you. I came into politics through Title IX, so that's why I'm a sports buff. But I just thought you might like to know that little bit of contemporary history.
Thank you.
Representative Duran.
Thank you so much, Mr. Speaker. And I do just want to rise in strong support of this resolution. I had the great honor of being part of a panel discussion recently after the movie Paving the Way by Geraldine Ferraro. And some of you may remember her story. She was the first woman to run for national office and run for Vice President of the United States. And I think that regardless of whether you're Republican or Democrat, that we should all be able to get behind the values of making sure that there are more women in higher levels of government, higher levels of business, and higher levels of power as a whole. And when I watched that movie, one of the things that bothered me the most about that election and some of the elections that she was part of was seeing when women fight with each other. And particularly when women fight with each other in high levels of power. And it's troubling because you would hope that there would be ways that we can all try and work together for the common value and be able to compromise. And so I encourage you to see that movie. I hope, too, that we someday have the first woman president of the United States. Thank you.
Representative Stevens.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I don't know if people had the chance to see this the other day. Politico did a forum funded by Tory Burch Foundation. And it was very interesting on women in politics. And they actually had, in my estimation, an excellent group, both Republican and Democratic women at the table talking about how women get things done. And I remember former Governor Ann Richards in Texas who said, when someone said, what are some of the essential things that you should know for running for office? And Ann Richards said that every woman should take an economics course. And that was when I was in high school. And I will tell you that it stuck with me for so long because I really believe the work that's done today. I believe the discussion of women on the Joint Budget Committee. I believe that all of the committees that we serve on, that women bring such value to the discussion. And I said this last year, but I'm going to say it again only because I have recently lived this, and so I think it's worth noting. Women usually, and they said this at the Politico event, women usually need to be asked to run. I don't know why, but a lot of women, very oftentimes, because they are caring for their children, they have their career, they're doing so many other things. So they're not really necessarily thinking. They might be thinking about it, but they're never really encouraged to run, saying, hey, you know what, Sue, you should step up and run. We'd love to see you. You know, Clarice, you should step up and do that. Now, men, they think they should run. They look in the mirror in the morning and they go, I should run. It doesn't really affect them. But women need that encouragement. And so today, I really do not only want to encourage every woman who's here to keep moving on and keep moving forward, because we bring, I believe, such balance and good ideas to the table. And the other thing I'd like all of us to do as women is to encourage another woman to run today and encourage someone to get in the game today, because we are needed, it's valuable, our state needs us, and our state needs to hear what we have to say. And so I want to thank, this is my last year, I want to thank the women that are here today. I want to thank the women that have gone before me, because they have provided so much wisdom to me personally, and so much enjoyment and frustration at times, of course, in really doing this job. But I think overall I'm better for it. I'm better for being here, and I think we're better for working together. And so thank you, and thanks to the women that are here. Remember today, maybe a goal by the end of the week, just encourage one person to run. Thank you.
Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And this is a great opportunity to thank all of the women of Colorado, those who came before us, those who are supporting us now, and my daughters and others, and all of our grandchildren that will be women activists and women contributors to the fabric of this society in the future. When I started out being interested in politics, I frequently was the only woman in the room. And I had a lot of support in those days from other women who were pushing me. And I always wanted to reach behind me and bring them up with me. And that is the beauty of women in this state, and beauty of the women that we have standing around us here. It is a very bipartisan thing. Madam Majority Leader and others who have helped me as I have taken a leadership role in this body. When I started out as a lobbyist in this body in the early 70s, I was one of very few women at that time. Now I suspect it's a majority of women out there looking in through the window. But there were women in the lobby who were very helpful, and we all kind of had to stand together. And I know you all here have experienced that in anything new that you have taken on, and you are the minority. It has been your women friends who bring you along. And I know from time to time we have our disagreements, and we may compete with one another for one thing or another, but for the most part, we stand solid. We are united, and we are women who make tremendous contributions to the state of Colorado. We will continue to do that, and we will continue to bring our friends, our women friends, along with us.
Madam Assistant Minority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And, you know, as the Majority Leader spoke about other women in our lives, there is always a great mom behind a great woman. I lost my mom 13 years ago. She would have loved this process. She would have loved to see me here. I'm sure she's watching down from heaven. But I don't want to forget that behind every great woman is a great mom. And I also, as you, my colleagues out there, the men that are out there, I just want to remind you of that great quote from My Big Fat Greek Wedding. The man is the head, but the women turn the neck.
Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, I think that's a fitting comment to end on. Is there any objection to taking a voice vote? Seeing none, we'll proceed in that manner. All those in favor of SJR 21 say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. SJR 21 is adopted. Representative Labuda?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I ask that the current roll call be added as co-sponsors.
Seeing no objection, the current roll call will be made the co-sponsors of SJR 21.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Madam Majority Leader. What are we going to do? We could do some Senate amendments. Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that we proceed with the next order on the calendar, which is consideration of Senate amendments to House resolutions, House bills.
Seeing no objection, we'll proceed actually in order to our next order of business, consideration of Senate amendments to House bills and resolutions, I guess. Mr. Kohler, please read the title to House Bill 1142. Oh, Madam Majority Leader, sorry.
You want to do this? Or, okay. Oh, yeah.
Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to lay over House Bill 1142.
Till when?
Until the end of the calendar.
See no objection. House Bill 1142 will lay over till June 30. Okay, the end of the calendar. Mr. Kohler, please read the title to House Bill 1254.
House Bill 1254 by Representative Labuda, also Senator Balmer, concerning requirement to disclose fees charged to a unit owners association by a community association manager.
Madam Majority Leader. Representative Labuda.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, I've been here 8 years. This is the first time I've come down on third readings because this is the first time the Senate has seen that it needs to do something to the bill, but I move that we concur with the Senate amendments to House Bill 1254.
Please explain what the useless Senate did.
Actually, Mr. Speaker, this is the bill about transparency in HOA management companies, and we continued discussions. If you look at the amendment, it mandates that there will be more transparency in fees, and I ask for an aye vote on concurrence with Senate Bill 1254.
Seeing no further discussion, the question for the House is to concur in Senate amendment to House Bill 1254. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. Representative Szabo. Close the machine. With 64 aye votes, 0 no votes, 1 excused, and 0 absent, the House concurs in Senate amendments to House Bill 1254. Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the repassage of House Bill 1254 as amended.
Seeing no discussion, the question for the House is the repassage of House Bill 1254 is amended. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine, and members proceed to vote. Representatives Buck, Gardner, McNulty, Lawrence, Swam. Close the machine. With 53 aye votes, 11 no votes, 1 excused, and 0 absent, House Bill 1254 is repassed. Co-sponsors. Close the machine. Mr. Kohler, please read the title of House Bill 1047.
House Bill 1047 by Representative Becker, also Senator Guzman, concerning restrictions on the publishing of basic identification information on commercial websites.
Representative Becker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that the House concur in the Senate amendments to House Bill 1047.
Please continue, Representative Becker.
This is my mugshots bill. There was a party that raised constitutional questions, and so just to put that to bed, we made some changes suggested by the Department of Law that would make it unlawful simply extend the current law that makes it unlawful to use for commercial purposes, make it clear that that also applies in this instance. So it just requires any party to sign a statement that they would not use, if they obtain mugshots, would not use them to post online for commercial gain. And all parties agreed that all the stakeholders agreed to the change.
Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, the question for the House is to concur in Senate amendments to House Bill 1047. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine, and members proceed to vote. Close the machine. With 58 aye votes, 6 no votes, 1 excused, and 0 absent, the House concurs in Senate amendments to House Bill 1047. Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the repassage of House Bill 1047 as amended.
Seeing no discussion, the question for the House is the repassage of House Bill 1047 as amended. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine, and members proceed to vote. Representative Wyden. Close the machine. With 43 aye votes, 21 no votes, 1 excused, and 0 absent, the House repasses House Bill 1047 as amended. Co-sponsors. Close the machine. Mr. Kohler, please read the title of House Bill 1080.
House Bill 1080 by Representatives McLaughlin and Quorum, all Senator Roberts, concerning sales and use tax exemption for the Colorado Ute and Indians.
Representative Quorum.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I move that the House concur with the Senate amendments.
Please explain what they did, Representative Quorum.
Thank you. Basically, they put in a safety clause. Usually not a fan of safety clauses, but I think this case it is the proper thing to do.
Representative McLaughlin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Also, they clarified the issue regarding the relationship between registration of motor vehicles and residency requirements on the reservation, which is a good law.
Seeing no further discussion, the question for the House is to concur in Senate amendments to House Bill 1080. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine, and members proceed to vote. Representatives Humphrey, Labuda, Priola, Rankin, and Young. Close the machine. With 53 aye votes, 11 no votes, 1 excused, and 0 absent, the House concurs in Senate amendments to House Bill 1080. Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for repassage of House Bill 1080 as amended.
Seeing no discussion, the question for the House is the repassage of House Bill 1080 as amended. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine, and members proceed to vote. Representatives Buck, Conti, Gardner, and Priola. Close the machine. With 55 aye votes, 9 no votes, 1 excused, and 0 absent, House Bill 1080 is repassed. Co-sponsors. Close the machine. Mr. Kohler, please read the title of House Bill 1193.
House Bill 1193 by Representative Salazar, all Senator Cafalas, concerning requirements governing the imposition of a fee for the research and retrieval of public records under the Colorado Open Records Act.
Representative Salazar.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm going to evoke the name of Amy Winehouse when she said no, no, no. Mr. Speaker, I move that the House reject the Senate amendments to House Bill 1193 and that a conference committee be appointed.
Please explain why you want a conference committee, Representative Salazar.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I'm asking for a conference committee because they put a superfluous, ambiguous amendment to such a beautiful House bill, and I ask for your favorable vote.
So the Senate messed things up like usual. Representative Salazar.
You bet. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Seeing no further discussion, the request for the House is to not concur in Senate amendments to House Bill 1193 and request a conference committee be formed. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. Close the machine. With 56 aye votes, 8 Senate lovers, 1 excused, and 0 absent, House Bill 1193 is, the House rejects Senate amendments to House Bill 1193 and requests a conference committee be formed. There goes that class. Conference committee is Representative Salazar, Chair, Representative Lebsack, and Gardner, members. Mr. Kohler, please read the title of the House Bill 1210.
House Bill 1210, Representative Girola, Senator Roberts, concerning requirement that the state agency enter an intergovernmental agreement with the county to address wildland fires affecting certain state lands located within the county.
Representative Giroux.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Corey. I appreciate that. Members, I ask that the House concur with Senate amendments for House Bill 1210. You guys can do better than that. You're not, the volume's not there.
Please continue to tell us what the useless body did.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, or excuse me, Mr. Speaker. Members, this was the wildland fire bill that I was running with Senator Roberts. And basically the issue when we were going through the process of running the bill was that there were entities, primarily the counties, that were not happy with the fact that DNR was not involving state trust lands. And so what the amendment says is that DNR shall report, well, they're going to do a feasibility, evaluate this feasibility of entering into the agreements for state trust lands and report their conclusions and suggestions to the Wildfire Matters Review Committee. I ask for an aye vote.
Seeing no further discussion, the question for the House is to concur in Senate amendments to House Bill 1210. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine and members vote. Close the machine. With 64 aye votes, 0 no votes, 1 excused, and 0 absent, the House concurs in Senate amendments to House Bill 1210. Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the repassage of House Bill 1210 as amended.
Seeing no discussion, the question for the House is the repassage of House Bill 1210 as amended. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. Representatives Everett and Priola. Close the machine. With 64 aye votes, 0 no votes, 1 excused, and 0 absent, the House concurs. The House repasses House Bill 1210 as amended. Co-sponsors. Close the machine. Mr. Kohler, please read the title to House Bill 1186.
House Bill 1186, Representative Schaefer, Senator Aguilar, concerning the release of medical records to a person other than the patient in connection with setting reasonable fees to be paid for the release of the medical records.
Representative Schaefer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm very sorry. I move the House concur with Senate amendments to 1186.
Please explain what the Senate did.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, the Senate did see that the coroners asked to be excused from this bill. This bill never was intended to apply to the coroners. It does not apply to them. So they have been exempted from the bill. Also, language around the mental health records was clarified to ensure HIPAA compliance. And these are good amendments. I renew my motion for concurrence.
Seeing no further discussion, the question for the House is to concur in Senate amendments to House Bill 1186. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. Representatives May. Close the machine. With 64 aye votes, 0 no votes, 1 excused, and 0 absent, the House concurs in Senate amendments to House Bill 1186. Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the repassage of House Bill 1186 as amended.
Seeing no discussion, the question for the House is the repassage of House Bill 1186 is amended. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine, and members, please do your job. Close the machine. With 63 aye votes, 1 no vote, 1 excuse, and 0 absent, House Bill 1186 as amended is repassed. Co-sponsors. Close the machine. Mr. Kohler, please read the title of the House Bill 1277.
House Bill 1277, Representative Milton, all Senator Todd, concerning eligibility requirements for recipients of grants from the Military Family Relief Fund.
Representative Melton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It saddens me and pains me to ask to move that we concur with Senate amendments to 1277.
Please explain what the Senate did, Representative Melton.
Well, they added a safety clause. Genius. No, actually, it's a good safety clause because this goes to families who are experiencing hardships when the governor signs an executive order during a natural disaster or emergency. We wanted to make sure that we caught any disasters or emergencies that happen before the effective date in July. So I do ask for a aye vote on the concurrence.
Seeing no further discussion, the question for the House is concurrent Senate amendments to House Bill 1277. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine, and members proceed to vote. Representative Fields and Szabo. Close the machine. With 64 aye votes, 0 no votes, 1 excuse, and 0 absent, the House concurs in Senate amendments to House Bill 1277. Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the repassage of House Bill 1277 on third reading, and I beg your pardon, as amended.
Seeing no discussion, the question for the House is the repassage of House Bill 1277 is amended. Mr. Kohler, please open that machine, and members, please vote. Representative Humphrey and May. Close the machine. With 63 aye votes, 1 no vote, 1 excuse, and 0 absent, House Bill 1277 is repassed as amended. Co-sponsors. Close the machine. We're going to now go to seconds and be here till 4. No? Oh. Okay, how about we do announcements and introductions? Any announcements or introductions? Representative Singer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, please join me March 31st. That's Monday from noon to 1 for not only free lunch, but the Colorado Children's Caucus will be having former and current foster care youth coming to the Capitol to discuss the difficulties they deal with in obtaining housing, medical care, and other critical services as they age out of the child welfare system. It's a really rewarding thing to hear from kids and adults that have been through our foster care system so we can do a better job, and there's also free lunch. Hope to see you there. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Any further announcements or introductions? Seeing none. Members, for all your great work, take the next 2 days off. You are free to go. Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move the House stand in recess till 1 p.m. this afternoon, at which point we will adjourn until March 31st at 10 a.m.
See no objection, the House will stay in recess till 1 p.m. today. Have a great weekend, everyone.